Another very important point that will help you improve your writing is to vary your sentence length. This is important because it helps to create a good rhythm, it offers variety for the reader, and it also helps to create white space on the page, which is very appealing to the reader's eye. So to restate that, you should not always stick with the same length of sentences. Occasionally you should throw in a short sentence, and sometimes you might even have a long sentence. Most long sentences could be broken in half, and many short sentences could be joined to the sentence after them to make them longer. So look at your paragraphs when you're finished and see if you've varied your sentence length, because it'll help the reader and it'll turn a piece of writing that is monotonous and boring into something alive and exciting. In one of the writing classes I took at Indiana University, I had a professor who worked at the Indianapolis Star. He told the class that a good sentence length for the average person to read is 16 words. He also said if a sentence began to get close to 32 words, then they would usually try to break that sentence down into a smaller chunk of thought. So I've always tried to make it a general rule to stay around 16 words or less. And as I previously said, sometimes it adds to the effect to throw in a short sentence now and then. Now I realize some listeners may be thinking, oh, writing's not really that important. It doesn't matter what your sentence length, the reader will listen and understand. Well, that's only partially true. How many times have you been reading something and your mind began drifting in thought to something else because the piece that you were reading wasn't holding your attention? Here's an example I use in class. Many really good blues guitarists have all had the last name King. They've been named Freddie King and Albert King and B.B. King. The name King must make a bluesman a really good bluesman. The bluesmen named King have all been very talented and good guitar players. The claim that a name could make a guitarist good may not be that far-fetched. Now here's the same information, only revised. Notice that it starts with a short sentence instead of the long one in the previous version. What makes a good bluesman? Maybe, just maybe, it's all in a stately name. B.B. King, Freddie King, Albert King. It's no coincidence that they're the royalty of their genre. When their fingers dance like court jesters, their guitars gleam like scepters, and their voices bellow like regal trumpets, they seem almost like nobility. Hearing their music is like walking into the throne room. They really are kings. Now, whether you agree with the words of this paragraph or not doesn't matter, but I think you'll have to admit that the second version is easier to read and seems to have a better rhythm that makes it more pleasant to read. So you will improve your writing and you will gain the reader's favor if you vary your sentence length. The next point is very similar. Vary your paragraph length. This is important for all the same reasons that were just mentioned about the sentence length. One, smaller paragraphs are easier to digest. A long one-page paragraph fills up the page so much it just has a psychological effect that the reader doesn't want to read it. But if you present the reader with a page of writing that has several short paragraphs, it'll look much more appealing. What's the rule for a paragraph size? Well, there's no real rule. Commonly, most of us have heard from our high school English teachers that a paragraph should be 3 to 5 sentences. And that's a good rule for guidelines. But a paragraph can be longer. A paragraph can be shorter. How short? Well, a paragraph can be one word. How many times have you been reading a fiction story When suddenly you come across an extremely short paragraph that the writers put in for an effect, say for example, someone pulls the trigger of a gun and it only clicks, the gun doesn't work, their response is, "Oh no," or "uh-oh." Or you'll come to the end of a chapter when the last paragraph is one word, "Stop." So there are times when a paragraph can be as short as one word, but typically the general rule is 3 to 5 sentences. My students have difficulty with this, and I tell them that if in doubt, you probably should start a new paragraph. We all know that the rules for a new paragraph is when you change thought. And that makes it difficult for some because many times you feel like you're not changing thought. Your paper is about one subject and you're talking about that same topic all through your paper. But most of the time I've found that if you'll look at every 3 to 5 sentences, you'll find a place to start a new paragraph. And it seems that we have this intuitive ability inside of us that we know where to start a paragraph. And so when I tell my students that if you're in doubt, go ahead and start a new paragraph, 99% of the time, they're right. They choose the right place to start a new paragraph. So be sure and vary your paragraph length. Typically, it looks nice on the page if there are at least 3 paragraphs on a page or more. The white space makes it much easier to read. It's more pleasant to the eye. It doesn't look as dense and congested. Look at these 2 examples. First, we have a page taken from a book that is dense writing with little or no paragraphing. And compare that to a page that has lots of paragraphing. Which would you rather read? Most of us would choose to read a story that has more white space on the page. So vary your paragraph length. Okay, the next point of writing. Avoid cliches. Remember at the outset of these lectures when we talked about there are some classic rules that you hear over and over again? This is one of those classic or cardinal rules. Avoid cliches. A cliche is a phrase that we've used to describe something, and we use it over and over again, such as new and improved, or higher than a kite, cute as a button, clean and fresh, soft as a rabbit's fur, hard as a rock, fire engine red. And those phrases at one time were probably fresh and appealing to the ear. But after we've heard the phrase ticked along like clockwork hundreds and maybe thousands of times, it no longer has that freshness with it. In fact, many times we don't even recognize it. So instead of using a phrase like dead as a doornail or deep as the ocean, pick something different. Come up with something different. For example, her hat looked like a cushion with the stuffing out. Or it tasted like a mouthful of bees. Or instead of saying he was a little slow today, maybe you could freshen up that phrase and say something like, the wheel keeps spinning, but the gerbil is dead. So avoid those cliches whenever possible. They don't help your writing, and they're definitely a mark of a beginning writer. The next point, revise and edit with time. This is probably one of the most difficult points that a new writer has to learn. No one likes the idea that they'll have to revise their paper again or their story. But I can promise you that all good writing became good writing because it was revised and edited over and over again. It's been written that Ernest Hemingway revised and rewrote the ending of Farewell to Arms at least 32 times. But revision is the number one element that separates the beginning writers from the good writers. writers that get published, and writers that write something that helps other people are the ones that go through their writing, their pieces, their articles, their stories, and they look for sentence length, paragraph length. They look for cliches, and they change, move around, and revise. And the problem with revision is we're so close to our writing that we can't see our mistakes. It's like looking in the mirror. You can't really tell if you're dressing funny or not. You need someone to point it out to you. However, when you look back on a picture of yourself from a few weeks, months, or even years in the past, you realize you were indeed dressing funny, and you wonder, what in the world was I thinking? And your writing's the same way. When you write something, you should put it in the drawer for several days and preferably several weeks. And then when you pull it out, you can see it with fresh eyes. You can see your mistakes more readily. Naturally, we don't always have the privilege to put our writing away for several weeks. But that's why we start writing as soon as possible and get it finished as soon as possible, and then we can let some time lapse and revise it. Frank O'Connor confessed that he routinely revised his work 50 times or more. Raymond Carver admitted he revised his works at least 10 times. Tolstoy's work, War and Peace, was revised 8 times. So revision is your friend. Write, put it away, revise, put it away, and revise again. Okay, last of all, I want to touch briefly on a few important points, but I won't stay long. Next, use picture nouns and action verbs. And by that I mean choose your nouns well. If you say, Sarah lived in a house, and I'm reading that in my mind, I'm wondering, what did the house look like? Was it a shack? Was it a mansion? Was it a palace? Was it a hut? So use nouns that would be more descriptive when possible. And if you use better nouns, you can use less adjectives, adverbs, and less verbs. When you say she hit the man, I'm wondering, did she slap him? Was it a love pat? Did she punch him? Was it a playful jab? Or did she bash his head in? So use picture nouns and action verbs. Next, put key words in key places. My professor at the University of Indianapolis would say, your sentence is fine, but you're putting a 50-cent word in a $5 place. By that, he meant that at the beginning of the sentence and at the end of the sentence is the place where the word that you use there will stand out. The beginning of the sentence is the key place where the word will resonate in our mind. For example, look at the sentence, it's time now for all men to come to the aid of their country. But what if we replaced that with this sentence, now is the time for all men to come to the aid of their country. So that word now at the beginning of the sentence adds more emphasis. Or what if we put it at the end of the sentence? Instead of saying it's time now for all men to come to the aid of their country, we could revise that and say, it's time for all men to come to the aid of their country now. So put key words at key places, and that'll improve your writing. And last of all, I just want to briefly mention parallelism. Parallelism. Let's look at the sentence, John likes fishing, swimming, and to hike. That sentence does not have good parallelism. It should be, John likes fishing, swimming, and hiking. And of course, you could recast that sentence in different ways. John likes to go running, fishing, and he enjoys reading books. You could revise that better. You could say, John likes to go running, fishing, and reading. You could say, John likes running, fishing, and reading. She likes to play tennis, swim, and watch television soap operas. That should be revised. One of the ways it could be revised She likes to play tennis, go swimming, and watch television soap operas. Or how about this sentence? We are not so much what we eat as think. Well, most of us would understand what the writer was meaning by that sentence, but how much better if we'd written, we are not so much what we eat as what we think. Or even better, we are not so much the food we eat as the thoughts we think. So we should always revise our sentences and look them over real good and make sure we have good parallelism. And that'll improve your writing. Okay, so that's the end of our discussion on points for writing. I hope this has been beneficial to you, and I certainly hope you've taken notes and that you'll review those notes occasionally to help improve your writing. I wish you the best on your writing journey, and I pray that the Lord will use you and bless your writing, anoint it to help other people.